Have you seen me dice bag? The Grognard Files.
Hello, my name is Dirk the Dice, the host of the Grognard Files podcast, where we talk bobbins about tabletop RPGs from back in the day and today. This is something a little bit extra from our usual programming. One of the side projects that I enjoy the most about the Grognard Files is the Great Library of RPGs book club that we started last year. You know, we don't really get enough time to talk to each other outside of the game in this new age of online gaming, so the book club was conceived as a space for gamers to meet and chat about gaming adjacent topics, sometimes books, but not always. Meeting once a month on Zoom with breakout rooms to keep it cosy, we've covered everything from John Peterson's books about the hobby, The Elusive Shift, and the more recent Game Wizards about the early years of TSR. We've also gone on to specific issues of White Dwarf, Imagine, Different Worlds, and Avalon Hill's Heroes. Also films. We watched Krull and Hawk the Slayer, the world's most expensive LARP, and a graphic novel, Jodorowsky and Mobius's collaboration, The Incal. Also, at the end of the year, we got together to see Has He Been, to share our collective bounty from Christmas. April's meeting in 2022 coincided with Virtual Grogmeet, so we had an extra special meeting. We discussed The Gutter Prayer, the first book in the Black Iron Legacy series of dark fantasy novels. After the meeting, we arranged a Q&A session with the author, gaming's very own Gareth Hanrahan. This is his second appearance on the GROGPOD. He first appeared in episode 21 talking about Night's Black Agents. His contribution to gaming has been immense, and we talk about some of his projects in this first part of the interview. The Gutter Prayer is a novel set in the city of Gurdon and follows the story of three unlikely protagonists. Carrie, or Carillion Tay, is forced to become a thief to try and restore some of her family's former wealth. Spar is afflicted with a stone plague, which is steadily calcifying his body and turning it into stone. And Rat is a corpse-eating ghoul. There are spoilers in this discussion, but I hope that it'll encourage you to read it as we explore the inspirations, techniques and considerations made by Gareth when he was working on the project. I hope you enjoy it. I'll be back at the end to give a bit more information about how you can join the book club and liven up your Sunday mornings. Until then, Ramblers, let's get rambling. Okay, welcome to the Great Library of RPGs book club. We meet every first Sunday of the month. It's been described by Paul Fricker as Sunday School for Geeks. And this month, we've been reading The Gutter Prayer by Gareth Hanrahan, a well-known game writer and designer. And we're delighted that he's joined us today. Hello, Gareth.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's good to have you again. We last met, I think, in 2018, and a lot has happened in the world since then, hasn't it?
Yeah, I miss news being boring, not waking up and doing damage control every morning.
You've got a very beautiful Zoom background there. So where are you calling from?
I'm calling from the edge of Ireland, down in Kerry at my in-laws' place. We came down for a day 2 weeks ago and then all got COVID. So we spent a week hiding in a bedroom. We're all pretty much recovered now. But, it is very nice and much nicer to be out of one small sticky bedroom with 5 people living in it, and also be able to breathe.
And have you moved? I don't ask this question because it might be quite traumatic for you. I consider it.
Basically, yeah, we knocked down our house just before COVID started to rebuild it, and COVID delayed that rebuilding somewhat, and it was nearly finished about 6 weeks ago. And we moved out of a rental place on the grounds that, even if they were slightly delayed, we'd be in within two weeks, with like, they would stay with relatives, whatever. And then there were storms here, which took out some of the power grid. And the people who were supposed to be hooking up the power to our house were all fixing, like, fallen cables and so forth. So that was like 6 weeks ago. So we've had a lot of being nomadic in the last while. But we finally have power. So another 2, apparently, we should finally be in.
Has that affected your work rate? Surely not. I mean, how have you managed to keep working in those conditions?
I am. April is going to be very, very much a catch-up month in a sort of very frantic way. Nothing has fallen through yet, but I am uncomfortably close to certain deadlines.
And is that how it feels for you, like a series of deadlines? Because I know since we last met, you've produced a whole load of stuff. Because when we last met, I think the Persephone Extraction was about to be released. Night's Black Agent Solo was about to come out, and since then you've produced a lot more stuff as well.
I have. I'm not quite sure what, but because of like the pandemic and printing being so weird, especially with like the rise in the price of paper, I've done a load of things that actually haven't come out yet. So I'm trying to recall like what I've actually done, what I've done since then. I've handed in Poison Tree, which was my edits and development on the Cthulhu campaign done by the good friends, which hi Paul. What else have I done? The 13th Age campaign I've been working on for ages, which is approaching finished. Currently, I'm working on the Ocean Game, which is another long running Pelgrane project. Pookie is helpfully holding up books I've written, which apparently come out in the intervening months, which is the Book of the Underworld and Book of Demons, 13th Age. And I also did a bit of Drakenhall, and there's some One Ring stuff in the pipeline, and there are novels as well. I keep busy.
As I mentioned, the Persephone Extraction is part of Virtual Grog Meet, which is the convention we've run this weekend. I completed it last night. We started off as a one-shot last year. We got carried away and we did it over 5 sessions. So we completed the Persephone Extraction last night. You'll be pleased to know that the world was saved.
Yeah, it's another adventure that became like, oddly topical given like, the final parts about a pandemic. Yeah, but between that and the other Restorations campaign I did, the Zlozny Quartet being set in like, parts of Ukraine, that's another one that's become alarmingly topical.
And one of the things that we were discussing this morning was about your role, that you seem like somebody who is both an ideas person, but also a completer finisher. So somebody who comes into a project and brings it all together. So how would you describe yourself?
Someone whose name I'm completely blanking on, which is really annoying because I'm a really nice person. Describe me as a builder, and that like I'm good at building on stuff other people have done, and I think that's kind of accurate. That I'm when I can come up with my own ideas, I'm far more comfortable sort of riffing on existing stuff and like adding on and expanding on things. So yeah, I think it's a fair cop that I'm good at sort of bringing stuff together to finish things and taking someone else's outline and expanding on that. It helps when half the outlines are from Ken Hite, because he does very good outlines. Admittedly, they tend to be rather ambitious outlines because he knows you won't have to do them. So he throws every day he can come up with and goes, right, car, sort that out.
And how do the other projects come to you then? So in what form are they? So Persephone Extraction, for example, had a number of authors. So are they commissioned separately and brought together?
Yeah, Persephone, that one, we were coming back from Gen Con, and we had our sort of annual Pelgrane meeting in like the coffee shop of Indianapolis Airport, and we said, okay, we need another Red Spec Agents campaign that's like smaller and more manageable than Dracula Dossier, because Dracula Dossier had just come out and there was a lot of interest in Red Spec Agents. So I threw together an outline on the plane back, and we found some writers and fired that off, and then I did my sort of like sprinkling of fairy dust and brought it all together at the end, writing the final adventure and then going through them all to edit them for consistency and to add links between them.
And the cover for that adventure sells it, doesn't it? It's a great cover.
Mike Red's doing assault on a Greek monastery. What more could you want?
And The other project that I need to mention that is getting a lot of consideration is Pirates of Drunnox. Now, I've got a quote here from Mr. Blythe Blythe of the Grognard Files, who described it as a work of genius.
Pirates, it was a very, very odd project. It happened it started just as I was about to leave Mongoose, and sort of continued after that. And it was written, sort of Dickensian way, because I had the outline. And originally it was supposed to be just a sort of standard project, but then it ended up being released in as a sort of part work in PDF, like each venture was done separately. So normally if I'm doing a long campaign, I'll write the whole thing, or the whole thing be written, and then I'll come back and I'll edit it and add connections between the various ventures, and sort out that A leads to B leads to C. But with Pirates, the first adventure was published as it was written the second one, and then the second one was out as I was doing the third one, and so forth. So I couldn't go back and change stuff. So it was a bit of a tightrope act. Anything I had written was now fixed canon and could not be changed, even if I had a better idea later on. So I'm amazed it's where it came together so well. But I think, in retrospect, the secret sauce of that campaign isn't its sandbox nature or anything. It is purely having Brian Blessed as the first NPC you meet, because everyone can do a Brian Blessed impression. If Brian Blessed tells you to do something, you're probably going to do it. But at the same time, you don't feel that Brian Blessed is this wise Gandalf figure who knows what's going on. You get the impression that Brian Blessed has this vague idea. And you're okay, you're on board with this, he's shouting very loudly at you. But you also feel okay, I'm going to take Brian Blessed's vague idea and implement it my own way. Because the players both sort of initial push to do something, but they feel they can interpret that however they want. They can go out and conquer the universe in whatever way they want, as urged on by Brian Blessed, a sort of giant bearded cheerleader.
Well, looking forward to starting play that in September. We're scheduled to start that and probably finish it in 2030. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, it is one of those sort of piece of string campaigns, with as long as you want to make it.
I think that's what I found with Persephone as well, that the beauty of it, being able to do it over 5 sessions, is that you could actually construct campaign from it just using elements of it, because I suppose that's the beauty of the gumshoe format, isn't it, that you can see where things connect. And
exactly. The joy of gumshoe is the connections. It just it sort of strips away all the sort of fat and skin of adventure and shows you the skeleton very, very clearly, so you can see how the adventure is going to walk and run, so to speak.
We're here today at the book club. We've been reading the Gutter Prayer, which is the first in your trilogy, the Black Iron.
Not a trilogy.
Legacy. It's not a trilogy. Oh, right, okay.
So there are only 3 books out. I'm going to do more at some point.
Oh,
but
right.
Because everyone assumes that fantasy books come in trilogies, lots of people assume the 3rd book is the last one. And they're screaming, no, it's not. There will be more.
Oh, excellent.
So trilogy in 5 parts, ideally. But,
like all the best trilogies.
Yeah, I mean, it was sold to the publisher as basically 1 book, and they said we want a 2nd book of the series. And I went, okay. And I went, will that be it? They said, no, we might do more. So the 3rd, we are only doing 3 books, or we're only going to do 5 books. So I'm going to I'm aiming for 5. It may only be 4. We shall see. But it was an education in the assumptions of a different market.
Yeah. We have some questions around that, about that transition. But I just wanted to talk about how it came about and how it was conceived, and how did you get to the point of pitching it as a novel?
There's no sort of single moment of inspiration. It started out actually as, do you know National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo?
Oh yes, in November. Yeah.
Exactly. I try and do that every year when I have free time, which is 3 times the last 20 years. Purely because even if I don't get anything usable out of it as a story, I generally find that basically I'll come up with ideas I like. I wrote a 30,000 word start of a novel back in 2005 or something. And that never went anywhere in itself, but I used bits of it in like many different adventures and monster manuals and whatever, just because I'd like thrown out so many random ideas by subconscious that it was a good source. So I tried that again, and I wrote the first 20,000 words of the Gutter Prayer or so. And actually, maybe more, maybe 30, 40, and stopped and moved on to a different attempt at a novel. So I wanted to try doing a novel. I'd done so many role things. I wanted to see if I could obviously work in a different style and write something that like, non-role players could understand. And then my wife wisely said, like, instead of starting a different book, why don't you actually finish that one? So I complained and said, no, it's terrible. But sat down and finished the Gutter Prayer. And then I sent it into a couple of open calls for novels, and it did okay. Like it reached it wasn't immediately rejected, but didn't get published there. And I was going to self-publish it. And then a friend of mine, Richard Ford, who was an editor at Mongoose back in the day and has since become a novelist, said, "Oh, my agent John Gerald is always open to submissions. Send it to him." So I sent it into John, expecting nothing to come, but expecting that I would kickstart it and self-publish. I was talking to Greg Stolze about options for doing novels and so forth through self-publishing, and John Gerald said, "No, I like it." And John is this he's ancient doyen of the British sci-fi scene. He's he's been around for ages. He knows everyone. I think he was the first person to publish Robert Jordan or someone. He's very, very, very well established, and is just a terribly, terribly English fellow. And within a few weeks, he had landed at Orbit, and I remember being inside watching Thor Ragnarok in the cinema and getting texts on my phone and running up the bathroom and him going, "I think we can get some more. I'll talk to them again." And then me running back to the bathroom, 10 minutes later, going, "You should take this offer. It's a very good offer."
It's excellent.
And then suddenly I had a novel deal, which was very, very gratifying, I must say.
Brilliant. And it is the city of Gurdon is very arresting. And I think we've all pointed out in our discussions this morning that it's quite a striking prologue. This idea that the city has some sort of sentience. I suppose that is a familiar idea from Eyes of the Stone Thief as well, isn't it? This idea that the city and architecture has a mind of its own.
Yeah, I seem to be very, very drawn to sort of sentient architecture and evil places. Also, as people pointed out, the prologue is in the second person present tense, which is a weird way to write a novel, but it's exactly how you run a game. It starts out you are standing on a rise over the city. A very pretentious way to start a novel. A friend went through the book at me going, "You wanker, what are you doing?" But it is exactly how one would run a game. So I think I was very, very nervous and feeling like I was trespassing into someone else's territory when I started writing prose. So I sort of started with something comfortable and familiar to myself.
And the other element of the novel that stands out are the three central characters. So talk about how those came about. So the idea of Spar, Ghoul, and Carrie. Who did you start with?
Starting with Carrie. I tried doing novels before a couple of times, and I always found the same problem, where I was so used to writing role-playing campaigns and so forth that I would set up this interesting setting, no problem. Interesting plot, yep, do that. Protagonist characters, well, that's the player's problem. I was sitting there waiting for my main characters to show up and do something, and because there were no players there to to drive the story, nothing happened. So I wrote started 2 or 3 novels where interesting setup and then just stops. So Carrie, I basically came up with a protagonist who was so impulsive and hair trigger that if something happened, she would react and do stuff instantly, even if that was absolutely the wrong thing to do or utterly stupid. She would sort of leap in feet first to any situation. And that sort of kicked off the story in that she started reacting to stuff and things started happening.
Perfect player.
Exactly, yeah. And then once you have a sort of like, impulsive, quick to act character, so you want to sort of contrast and sort of fall to that. So you have someone who is by their nature like slow and thoughtful. I'm not quite sure where the aspect of him being diseased came from. Partially, it was the fact that I'd blown my back out a few months before writing it, so it was like in a mindset where moving was hard. And I was taking like painkillers every day, and something of that sort of filtered into the novel. That's where Spark came from. And again, I think I was a bit sort of nervous starting off, so I sort of reached for familiar tropes, and I've been doing Lovecraftian stuff for many, many years. So, I mean, I can like riff on ghouls until the cows come home and get eaten. So that's where that came from. And the thing is, once I had a group of protagonists who were doing stuff, then I was able to like bring in all my long, sharp, and jamming skills, and like come up with like people for them to interact with and like situations for them to get into. But once they were moving, it was a lot easier. It was that sort of initial shove I needed to get the story going.
What we wanted to ask about as well is the process of writing these novels. So, what tools do you use? And the way that I've been asked to ask it is: are you a plotter or a pantser? Have you heard of that before? So, you're flying on the seat of your pants. Yeah.
I kind of fall in between the two stools. What works for me so far, what I'm trying to change to being more plotty for efficiency's sake, is I write like to go to prayer. I wrote like the first like 20,000 or so words. Then sort of sat down and write what's going on, where is the story going. Wrote an outline for the next of the story. Wrote another 20,000 words. Stopped again, did another outline, and sort of plotted. It's like running a campaign where you're plotting the next session. You're not plotting the whole campaign advance, but like the players go home and you go, okay, they're coming to the city next round or next week. I'll write to the city and stuff that happens there. But what's beyond the city, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, it's actually quite similar to how Tolkien did it, because I did that deep dive on the history of Middle Earth books and how he wrote Lord of the Rings, and he also like did the whole thing where you like write a bit, outline the next bit, write a bit, outline the next bit. In terms of tools, I started using Scrivener, which is this word processor designed for doing novels and so forth. And that's purely because it's not Word. All my role-playing stuff I do in Word, so I wanted like sort of a slightly different space for fiction to get myself in a different mindset. And it's worked so well that I cannot use Scrivener for anything other than fiction. I cannot even start fiction in Word.
Well, that's interesting. Just so that you can shift between two different hats. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I think handy to have the two different hats and like sort of keep the approaches different, because while there's a lot of crossover between the two in terms of techniques and so forth, there are different assumptions you got to make, and like I need to make the novel assumptions when doing a novel.
What I was going to ask is, how do you keep track of all the different elements in the novel? Is that a similar process to how you keep track of games?
Oh yeah, I mean, I do it in what I'm sure is a very, very stupid way, where I keep most of it in my head, and every so often I will write down incomprehensible lists that I will lose again. But the act of writing them down reminds me of stuff. But I'm pretty good at like uploading a vast amount of information to my head, holding it there for a while, and then losing it again. Like if you ask me about the Dracula dossier or Eyes of the Stone Thief or Pirates of Journex, I will remember 2 or 3 bits right now. But when I was in the middle of writing them, I would have every single character, every single. So like when I start like a new novel in the series, I would have to read the previous ones again and sort of re-upload all that data. I should really like work on a way of capturing it more efficiently, but yeah. It works.
Absolutely, and inevitably, as gamers, we start asking the questions around how is this series going to play into gaming? Do you have any intention, or is there any interest in adapting it into a game?
I kept the rights firstly. Those the ones who changed me into my contract. I said like I will retain the role-playing rights. So we won't like them off if anyone asks. So I don't. I want to do it at some point. I'll finish the series first, or at least get it to a reasonable stopping point, and then I don't know. I'll definitely do something with it, even if it's just a brief 5e supplement with like the monsters and the city guide. I don't know. I've had vague conversations with like various friendly publishers, but there's nothing at all definite yet. But yeah, it sort of has to happen as an inevitability.
And that's part of the world building is the monster creation. That's another element of the novel that's striking, isn't it? The tallow men, for example, and the crawling creatures, and are great. But one of the things that I really liked about it was this idea that the gods were manifest from spells that had taken on a life of their own. There's lots of great ideas in here that you could definitely use for gaming.
Oh, yeah, I mean, half the ideas are like gaming ideas I had. I went, this would be this will never play out in a game, or is like play out in a game, but I can expand on it here. Because in a game, you often these sort of throwaway ideas that will never get used properly, because the players have moved on to the next encounter or whatever. But when you're doing a novel, you can sort of sit with them a bit and think about ramifications.
Well, what I'd like to do now, Gareth, if that's all right, is to introduce the members of the book club who've got some questions for you. So I'm going to invite Abs to ask his question about the difference of approach. Hi, Abs.
Hi, Gareth. I just had a question about the process, in particular, maybe the editing process. Like when you're working with a big publisher, like Orbit Hachette, how did you find that? How is it different to the process when you're working with games publishers?
I mean, a lot of gaming stuff, the editing is fairly minimal. In some cases, non-existent. In other cases, it's there, but they won't ever really dig that. But because the structure of role-playing game is so sort of conditional, like this might happen, this might happen, this might happen. So you're sort of surface level exploration of various possibilities. I even look up to GM. The editor really can't change that much because there's that much there to dig into. Whereas the novel, the question they ask over and over again is how does this make the character feel? How do they feel expand on their feelings at this moment, expand on their reaction at this moment. The other thing is the astounding difference in just time frame. I just handed in a novel there yesterday, or the edits to a novel, and that novel hasn't even been announced yet. It's due for publication in March of next year, I think, is the current date. It will now go off to a proofreader. It'll go off to a couple of editors. I'll get proofs back in a few months. Whereas the role-playing game, the turnaround is generally far, far quicker. I mean, obviously, Mongoose was an exception in terms of their turnaround date, where basically books went from conception to publication in 6 months or so. But for most role-playing games, I'll hand it a manuscript. There'll be a month or so of editing and stuff, and then it's off to layout. Whereas novels, everything is a year in advance.
Did you enjoy the editing process? Was there a lot of back and forth, or was it quite sort of compartmentalized?
No, there was some back and forth. There was a lot of conversations in the comments and Word docs. I enjoyed it once I got used to it. Because there's the same degree of editing in role-playing games, my first reaction was, oh God, I've messed this up completely, because you handed back this manuscript covered in red lines. And I think because of the way I sort of came up in role-playing games, I never really got any heavy initial edits, because I started off doing very, very small U20 things and then sort of meandered into a full-time position without ever really being challenged in that way. So I wasn't used to that level of feedback. But once you realize that the editors, they are trying to improve the book, and also they're generally right, partly because they've so much experience, but also because at that point I'd been writing the book for a year. I was so close to it, I couldn't sort of see the structure of it, whereas they're able to sort of step back and see the whole thing from start to finish and go, this whole section here is utterly irrelevant, cut all that, basically drops off here and here and here. But you've skimmed over this bit in far too little detail. You need to expand on that. So it was a good process, and also I sort of be able to take some of that advice and put it into role-playing games then as well. I find myself now asking a lot more how will the players feel at this point? How can I bring about emotion and so forth, as opposed to just concentrating on this or the tactical or mystery aspects of the scene.
Excellent.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Abs. And next, we've got a question from Ed Foster, who is a regular facilitator at our tables here at the book club.
Gareth, thank you very much. This is a really fascinating conversation. So I think one thing that struck me in particular was that one of the most striking elements of the novel is the way that the gods are the kind of the drivers forward, and particularly the Granite Valley interlude. It's not a very happy picture of divinity, and I'm just really struck by you've met. It feels a very modern sensibility, but could you talk a bit around that, the gods as drivers for this novel?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I do in both fiction and role-playing games is sort of take a fantastical idea and treat it with as much seriousness as I could, or as I can. So with the gods and the good prayer, it's okay, if you take a mythological conception of God, justice, and justice is not this abstract concept. There is a guy who embodies justice. Yeah. There is this justice has a force and a personality and opinions and associated regalia. How would that warp the world? And my conclusion was that it would be very, very frightening, because you basically have these obsessive cosmic forces deforming reality, and we'd be sort of trying to live in the shadows of them. Part of it as well, I mean, I said, the God of Prayer didn't have one single old conception, but one chunk of it was wandering around Tesco one day worrying about global warming and just-in-time supply chains, and the sort of feeling that we're all living in the shadow of these terrible invisible forces that control our reality, and that if one of them snaps or changes, everything would change in a moment, and everyone's walking around unaware of this.
Yeah.
And being a giant nerd, I went, right, instead of actually writing about serious stuff, I'll take that feeling of existential dread and stick a funny hat on it and give it a magic sword.
I do like that Tesco's finest to kaiju in one easy step.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of train yourself to have odd thoughts when you're doing role-playing games.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ed. And the next question is from Chris Webb. Just something about the ideas that you generate. I invite again, Chris.
Thank you. Hi, Gareth. Thanks so much for doing this with us. So I guess the question really is, how brave do you feel you need to be with the way you treat ideas? And it's I guess really the context for this is that I think I tend to hold on to an idea and stretch it a bit thin, whereas the book is just absolutely awash with ideas. And I'm just astonished by this sort of massive sprawl of ideas. So I just wanted to ask you about that, if I can.
Arguably, I was sort of too brave, because one complaint that people have made is that it basically is this fire hose of concepts, and I don't sort of sit there and develop them sufficiently, which is a perfectly justifiable criticism. I don't know where the right balance point is. I think it'll change for each story. I think a lot is basically just, can you make the reader feel comfortable and confident in their understanding of what's going on, and can they reasonably understand the story? But then again, I mean, there are other books which do far, far braver stuff than I ever dreamed of. I was reading what's her name? New Zealand author about Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth. There are these books about these far future necromancers, and the Harrow in particular is this absolute collision of different genres and approaches. The main character is going mad. There's one chapter is done entirely as a coffee shop alternate universe. It is this sort of absolute stream of bizarre ideas. And I was really going, I could never ever write this, because thanks Tamsin Muir, thank you, as the author. I would never ever be able to write this. I would never approach things this way. So I don't think there's a sort of right answer in how ambitious to get with your ideas. Some readers will just latch on and resonate. Some will bounce off completely. And really the question is, are you lucky enough to find in terms of publication, are you lucky enough find like an agent, an editor who resonate with that. You're looking to find readers who resonate with that. It is absolutely a crapshoot. There's no right answer, I think.
Thank you very much. For me, the book was a bit like you described Tamsin Muir's book. It was just like, where are we going next? And wow, hang on. It's great fun. So thank you.
Yeah. But some readers will hang on. Others will sort of like, let go and fall back and go, right, I have no idea what that was about. Off it goes.
Next up, I've got Tristan who's calling in from Japan. And we on our table, Tristan on our table, we were discussing Gurdon as a character within the city, within the novel. And Tristan came up with this idea of reverse psychogeography, and he's got a question about the city.
Hi, Gareth. Thanks for discussing your book and gaming with us. The question really was about the fictional influences of Gurdon and your ambitions regarding fiction as opposed to game writing in that respect. So we had hints of Ankh-Morpork, Fritz Lieber's world and China Miéville's London, among other things, in the discussion. I'm just wondering where you see yourself in the literary canon of fantasy literature, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I see myself in. Actually, I don't know if one can see oneself in literary canon. I think that's like very much a question for the audience and critics. I don't think you can sort of like say I am going to be mentioned in the same breath as X, Y, or Z. I mean, certainly, China Miéville was a huge influence on Gurdon. So was Imogen Harrison's Draconium, Max Gladstone's Craft books, and Robert Jackson's Cities books, Divine Cities. In terms of real world influences, Gurdon's geography is Cork, where I live, and it's like architecture is mostly Edinburgh. And so I started off, actually, I had a notebook where I was basically writing out interesting ideas for places in the city, just like names, and like I had vague intentions of doing a sort of a Waterdeep-esque city setting, which never came to anything, but like bits of that filtered into the book. And this is, again, possibly a sort of gaming influence. I like place. I like feeling that the characters are situated in a particular location, and I'm good, I think, at visualizing like different bits of location and how they interact and how you can get from A to B within a place. Because I spent like a career staring at maps and doing dungeon crawls. So yeah, I mean, I can analyze the influences and the logistics of writing a city, but in terms of how it impacts on the reader and how it what sort of place it has in the greater sort of fictional canon and so forth, I really couldn't answer because I have terrible guilt.
I suppose the corollary really is how is game writing and fiction writing different in a really big way? And we did have one member who guessed Edinburgh was a big influence, which is nice.
Well, I mean, game writing is ultimately super functional. Whatever else you're doing, it has to give advice to the GM on how to present a interesting plot, interesting situations to the players. You can be as detailed, as poetic, as lovely as you want in your writing, but you are still ultimately writing a technical manual which has a purpose. And as I've done with game writing, I mean, I love game writing. It's where I tend to remain. But there's always the back of your mind the fact that this book has a purpose. You're trying to achieve a particular technical goal. Whereas with novel writing, where your goal there is to entertain the reader, which is a much more sort of nebulous approach, given our goal, because there are many ways to do that. You don't need to tell the reader. You need to tell the GM what's going on, how A gets to B, what B means, what the various motivations of people are. When you've got one reader there, as long as you keep their attention, keep them entertained, you can do pretty much whatever you want. And so whatever you want becomes much more about provoking emotional reaction or creating a particular atmosphere with the prose. So it's a mindset of moving from working with the GM and giving them the advice and support and information they need to trying to create this emotional or aesthetic effect in the reader. It's a very pretentious way of putting it, but it is like the shift in mindset that's needed.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks, Tristan. Thank you. And one of the observations, it was Pookie that made, was that it has a very distinctive pacing, the book. So there's got long chapters at the beginning, and then towards the end it breaks into a quicker pace, shorter bursts. Was that also conscious, and what was you thinking around that?
I'd say semi-conscious is probably the best way to put it. As I said, my approach was write a bit, then go back and re-outline, edit a bit, and work out basically what I had done and where it was going. Partly the sort of quick pace of the last chapters is just me going, oh dear God, this is 180,000 words long. And I've been told it's hard to publish anything longer than 150,000 words. So quick finish it.
Yeah.
And also early on, I know that I really enjoy basically slipping into source book writing mode and having characters go off on long digressions about history and background and so forth, which my editors always say, cut this. And then they're going, no, this is the bit I like. This is the really fun part. There's a fantastic book, which I always plug, called Wonder Book by Jeff Vandermeer, which is this guide to writing fiction, but it's done for chunks from all different writers in there. And a sidebar from Kim Stanley Robinson, the Mars books, which have always taken a sort of a totemic touchstone, where Kim Stanley Robinson basically goes, people will tell you, cut exposition and cut, everything else, move the plot forward. Nonsense. If your exposition is fun and you enjoy it, and you make the reader enjoy it, then you can get away with it. Yeah. Which is how he justifies, 30 pages on, Martian soil chemistry, because it is really, really interesting. He makes it interesting. And similarly, I sort of will fight for my 5-page digressions about the underworld architecture of the city, because I find that interesting, and I hope I can make the reader interested as well. And also, this is again a sort of a role playing shtick I've picked up. I'm good at embedding stuff that will pay off later on.
Yes.
In those descriptions, there's very I rarely waste a description. I'm always good at sort of sticking clues in and foreshadowing and so forth, which I think is a sort of GMing tool, because when you're GMing, if you describe something, it's easy to make that relevant later on. Here, I with prose, I can sort of I can apply the same trick and go, oh, I mentioned that the city is built on pillars 50 pages ago. Aha! Now I stick bombs onto the pillars. The bag is going to blow up the pillars and collapse the city. Oh, ha, ha, ha. I am retrospectively a genius.
I've got Brinley would like to ask a question about pacing as well, so inviting Brinley.
Hi, Gareth.
Hey.
Our group this morning, when we were talking about this, we were struck by how fast-paced the book is. Very cinematic, very Marvel-esque, we thought, which led us to then dream about how you would think about adapting your series. The first thing that came to mind for us was a graphic novel. We thought it would be really suitable for that type of format. But I guess, what other kind of mediums do you think it would be suited to?
I honestly don't know. I know role-playing games, and I'm learning novels. I don't have the technical insight into other styles of things to really understand how it will be done. I can see in my head, the Netflix adaptation, or I can see how parts would work as a graphic novel. Although it would be hard. Because a lot of the Gutter Fair, especially, is very internal, because I took this sort of semi-shortcut of having a character who has lots of psychic visions, so she can have chunks of the plot dumped into her head, which was a very, very, in retrospect, a very, very easy out for me. but I'm not sure how one would convey that sort of interiority or internal experience in a graphic novel. But I'm sure there are ways to do it. But, and I would love to see what someone would do with the architecture, because I'd say I love architecture and describing cities, but you can only talk about crenellations and flying buttresses and spires in prose for so long before the reader starts throwing things at you. Whereas if someone was doing the few bits of art that have been done, someone could have great fun doing Baroque architecture and so forth. Yeah, I mean, the other cynical thing is if I want to adapt it, the rights are out there, so I will happily take their money if someone wants to do Guerdon, the scented perfume range or something.
Guerdon, the theme park. Yeah.
Actually, that would work better than perfume, because given so much of the book is set in sewers, it probably wouldn't work.
Yeah, essence of rat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Brindley. I've got a question as well from Steph, who he's a member of the GR fan club, and he was quite devastated this morning. So we're inviting Steph.
Hi, Gareth. Thanks for giving us the talk. The characters, obviously, there's obviously the main characters, but there's also supporting cast as well. One of them being Jer, and one of the common themes when we were having our discussion in our little group was that we were all saddened and distressed that Jer didn't quite make it. We thought maybe he would be part of your trilogy of 5 books and be one of these characters that goes all the way through. So I'm just wondering, obviously you've discussed how you have your fire hose kind of ideas, and then you were going back and rewriting parts of the book and after 20,000 words, etc. So was the vulnerability of the characters, and in particular Jer, set beforehand? And is there a version of the book where Jer actually makes it and survives and is the hero at the end?
I don't think I've ever read a book where any version where he would have been critical at the end, given so much about Carrie and her connection to Black Iron Gods and so forth. That's his death was a bit of a surprise. I was writing it and suddenly, I just killed him. Do I want to do that? Yes, I do. But it was a bit like the moment of the roleplay game where your monster rolls a critical hit and the player character just falls over dead. They're like, let that stand. That said, there are so many ways for people to come back that he may be showing up again in book 4.
There's lots of pleased people on this call now who are looking forward to that book.
But also about the issue with Gier was that from the start, his big thing was basically him hunting the crime boss Hanrahan, and once that plot was resolved, most was resolved in the first book, so he didn't have quite as much of a need to hang around for later ones as other characters. But to agree into complaint stuff there, because I have at this point now I have a plan for where the series will go. But when I was read the Gutter Prayer, I didn't, and his death was more of a surprise.
Thanks,
and also I wanted to have a bit more vulnerability, because I did feel like that for the stakes to be raised, someone had to be killed off or at least be horribly maimed.
Next, we've got a question from Dave Patterson, who describes himself as somebody who's been Pelgrane press ganged at a convention and ended up spending lots and lots of money thanks to your intervention. So I just invite Dave in to ask a question.
Enjoy the Pelgrane 4 for 3 deal.
I think it was something like 12 for the price of 5 or so. I don't know.
12 for 9 is an excellent deal.
With reference to sort of criticism, we were wondering how does that sort of very personal process of writing a book on your own differ from having written collaboratively on a role-playing game in the context of criticism? Do you take it better? Can you deflect it to other people in role-playing, or how do you think they differ?
Well, I mean, partly in a role-playing game, again, because it's so functional, if someone is criticizing, if there is generally a justifiable reason behind it, if someone says, these monsters are too weak in this encounter, or this bit of the plot doesn't work, you can sort of sit there and go, okay, are those monsters too weak? And you go, they should be pumped up a bit, or okay, I think that like particular plot connection works, but I can see how if a group misses, like, you know, the matchbox in the corner, I can see how the connection to the nightclub with the Cthulhu monsters isn't as clear. With a novel, yeah, the criticism does tend to be more sort of like, you know, you're not liking it. How supposed to phrase this? Like you had the effect you were going for, and it didn't resonate with someone. What I found, the biggest difference I found really though was with role playing criticism, it's okay for the writer to respond and give suggestions. Like, you know, if someone says, "Oh, like I can't run the Dracula dossier for my group because they will never sit down and read a, like, you know, 400-page handout. I can't use this book." Like, you know, yeah, that's a perfectly fair thing to say. And I will, like, you know, I have my standard spiel of, oh, you could, like, you know, here are ways to introduce it meaningfully, here are ways to, or simply here are ways to chop it up. Like, you know, you give them a version with, like, you know, post-its in the middle pointing at key clues, or you use them by chapter because it's been decoded or something. They basically, because it is like a technical problem to be solved, I can give solutions to that problem. Whereas with a novel, the culture is the author does not respond to reviews. It is like, you know, a very huge faux pas to, if a reader says, "Oh, I couldn't follow this plot," you can't go, "Well, you know, I'll explain the plot to you in a comment review." You cannot do that, and I've been told to not even attempt to do that. So yeah, there's a bit of a bigger divide. Like, you know, role-playing writers tend to be, like, because we're all gamers, we tend to be like fairly approachable, and, like, you know, you can ping someone, ask a question or whatever. Whereas novelists have to maintain a little bit more of a distance from the fans, which is one of the sort of the cultural things I've picked up on. Like, they can still, like, chat away and so forth, but more level of higher level of guard than it's expected. That could be me just coming from things from an odd little subculture.
I suppose it's in the mainstream as well, isn't it? So your criticism is probably reaching different audiences that because it's more exposed, isn't it? And in mainstream publications.
Yeah, I mean, to a huge degree, the market is like orders of magnitude bigger. So, like, you don't, I still don't know how many people have read it. And like, if a review comes, like, you know, if, like, there are, like, you know, what, like 4 or 5 role-playing game reviewers of note, okay. Whereas with novels, like, you know, you get a review from someone on, like, Tumblr or something, and you don't know if that person is, like, you know, a randomer with, like, 5 followers, or this, like, you know, book expert with, like, you know, 25 million followers who will make or break your career in an instant. It's just a whole a far larger and stranger world.
Do you take that criticism sort of more personally for the book, or your own reaction to it?
What I've found is, like, there's some reviews which you sort of just dismiss out of hand. Like, it's someone who, like, you know, should not they shouldn't have read the book, but, like, you know, the book is absolutely at odds with their particular interests or aesthetics, and they were never going to enjoy it. Other reviews have, like, more valid criticism. Like, you know, I know where my weaknesses as an author are, and I'm trying to improve on them. So I won't take that review personally. I'll sort of, like, add it to a mental database of, like, you know, here are the 5 most common criticisms about the book. Here's stuff you want to work on next time. So, like, you know, you need to, like, you know, I need to do better writing characters. I need to slow down the plot at times. And I'll try not to take it personally, because, like, they're reading a book I wrote, like, at this point, like, 5 years ago. And I know I've changed as a writer and as a person. And also, when you read a book, there's 2 people involved. There's the reader, there's the author and the reader. And the experience of reading the book is going to be a combination of their experience as well as what you've written. So you can only provide sort of half the input to their experience. So you can't take it personally, because you don't know where they're coming from or what their particular biases, experiences, and interests are. As sometimes you're lucky and it sort of resonates with the reader, but you can't. It doesn't always. So you can't you can write a perfectly good book and have it fall on stony soil, so to speak.
And thanks to everyone for asking the questions. We're nearly running out of time, but there was one question that came up, Gareth, that I'd like to think. What have you got against seagulls?
They're weird. No, I maybe it's like something like childhood trauma of having chips stolen at the seaside or something. They're just like they're very, very starry eyes, or very like frantic eyes. They're not quite like sort of flying rats, but there's like sort of flying piranha or something. I don't know. There's odd, and they're odd, and they're everywhere. They're very loud. To be so more serious, a lot of writing is taking these things that have an emotional charge for you and trying to convey that emotional charge to someone else, because the unexpectedness and strangeness of imposing or having someone else's experience imposed on your own worldview is like an interesting way to create an emotional effect. Like if I feel I don't feel that strong about seagulls, but I feel I've apparently a non-standard emotional reaction to the seagulls. So if I push that out of the reader, that will spark a new thought in the reader and have a feeling of sort of novelty and strangeness, which is the emotional effect I'm going for in the books generally.
Well, thank you very much, Gareth, for spending some time with us this morning at the book club. And I hope that you and your family get well soon from COVID.
No, we're mostly recovered. Soon we'll have a house and everything will go back to normal, and I can get back on deadlines.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to seeing whatever comes from your desk over the next few years. So thank you very much. And just ask everyone just to give a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all very much. Having people read the book is a joy. It's like not honestly I ever expected when I was writing it. I wrote it very much as sort of as a project for myself. It's been wonderful that it has sort of made its way out to the world and been received and spread out.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gareth.
Thank you.
Thanks very
Good
much.
rest of the day.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. See you now. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
If you'd like to join the book club, then please contact me via dirtthedice@gmail.com or on Twitter @thegrognardfile. It's managed through the Book Club's app, or alternatively, watch out for updates on the Discord channel. I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks to all the people who have been part of the book club over the past year. It's really been a highlight of my gaming month. Thanks. Until the next episode, which is coming soon, adios amigos.